Is this? Is Amazing. Hi, guys. I hope you're having a great day. Before I start the talk, I kind of wanted to gauge the audience governance experience and put your hand up if you've ever voted in any sort of governance system. And this could be a regional election for your own country. This could be voting for your class president. Yeah, who's ever voted in a governance system? Okay, sweet. Okay, now, who's ever voted for a governance system within a DAO? Okay, sweet. And who's a participant of a DAO to this day? Okay, sweet. We have a good DAO community here. So today I'm going to be talking about designing responsible governance systems and how our UI implications can be affecting both our DAO communities and the way that people are voting and the actions of our community members. So I think that while we're designing these systems and experimenting, we can kind of take a step back and look at the patterns that we're creating and how we can hold both our members and community members more accountable. So within this talk, I'm going to go into what element finance is, what we do and how we're relevant to this discussion, what the historical progression of governance systems in the space has been, and also what governance incentives can be in the future, because right now we only have currently 7% of people in the space vote for DAO elections. So noting this, we wanted to start a conversation about how we can better utilize governance incentives for DAO community members. And the last is how to contribute to Element and how you can reflect on this discussion for your DAO and the communities that you're also in. So first, what is Element Finance? So we're a fixed and variable rate protocol, and you can think of us as a yield management protocol, but our most popular DeFi product is fixed rate positions. So why fixed rate positions are huge? Because they have, historically in traditional finance, they were only available to institutional brokers, and now we have the opportunity to open them up to everyone. And they're really popular because they're a low risk DeFi product that you can go in for a 3, 6-month, or 12-month term, and you receive a rate at the end of this term. How I kind of explain it to my little sister is like it's like a mortgage. You know that you're going in for this rate. At maturity, you receive like 2% on top of the amount that you deposited, and it's a really easy, feasible way for beginners in the space to get yield for yield farming, or institutions in the future with credit and asset delegation to take out debt against their fixed rate positions. And that's something we've also been discussing and ideating within our community. So our community is pretty large. I think 30K, and our Discord members are pretty active and excited to build on the protocol. But we also have our governance launch that has been recent as well. So on top of having a DeFi product, we have a governance protocol named Council. And Council was launched March 22nd this year. And what Council is and why Council is so innovative is because Council uses voting vault contracts that allow for community members to be more invested in the DAO governance process. So for one example, we have identity vaults that no longer have one vote for one token and allow contributors and community members to be recognized beyond their token shareholder voting. So I think we've seen in Web 2, when a lot of Web 2 companies, you only had a say in the company based on your shareholder vote. And we are seeing that a lot in larger protocols as well. A lot of VC firms that have a large token shareholder amount, they're the ones that have the biggest voices in the space. So we wanted to rethink that model and how we can emphasize community members. Another great innovation that was done on our voting vaults was our actual voting, locking, and vesting vault. That's a smart contract capability that requires users to submit their eligibility for voting prior to a voting period to prevent Sybil attack and to ensure that the most engaged, most qualified, and most educated voters are voting within the voting period. So our governance launch also included an NFT claim incentive, and a lot of our UI had a lot of thought into the implications that I'm going to go into within this presentation. So to start off, I'm going to go back to the history of voting systems and how governance design was kind of rapidly changing within the space. And the first point was how we think about voter types. So governance design kind of originated with people wanting to vote and kind of creating polling products to gauge community feedback and what the community reception was. And this is just a general archetype of democracy systems. But within this, we started to see organization vehicles. And these organization vehicles were thinking about organization design of community. So how can we best organize the community that we're accumulating and they're voting to fit their organizational work structures, to ensure that we're pursuing consistent feedback, to ensure that it's closed to a point that it's not interfering with the work, but also it's open to the community for feedback and development. And then also governance types. So is it on-chain? Is it a hybrid where it's off-chain and on-chain? And is it fully off-chain, so it's very close to the community? And how we can improve these systems with forum polling and other products within the space. So this was kind of one of the first governance UI systems within the space. And this was Dash in the first DAO. And they had an on-chain voting system. And it was open community integrated. But you can kind of see how as public proposals, there wasn't really a UI for them to vote. And there wasn't really a way to gauge information about the proposals past the initial proposal. So it's very closed. You don't have very much context as a user going into the voting process. And this was kind of the origination of how voting UI systems for governance started. Then we started to reflect on those designs. And this was a design accumulated by Decreed. And this was the first open community design. So what open community means is that you had to see how many votes were in the community, the number of people that abstained, the number of people that were voting for. And you got to see voting profiles of who had the largest voting power within this vote and how this implicated the vote itself. And then we had makers. So I'm kind of biased because our CEO and governance architect, Charles, he architected a lot of our governance organization structure and our governance system. But he was actually a governance architect at Maker, and they were pivotal in being one of the first on-chain voting systems within the space. And why that was is because there was no polling or on-chain voting contracts that were completely on-chain and taking proposals at executable states prior to. So they kind of fully made the process automated and took into community feedback the open community voting system. And last but not least, my favorite is DeFi Summer. So why DeFi Summer was a pivotal point in the governance voting UI system history was because that's when liquidity mining emerged and exploded within the space. So this is a huge point in governance systems because then we started to see financial incentives for community members to get involved within contributions. We started to see like formalized token grant systems, which is the equivalent of token equity for a lot of contributors within DAOs. And we start to see formal financialized incentives in these DAOs and how token emissions were also affecting the DAOs and these liquidity mining programs. I think Compound was probably the most famous, but Uniswap was also pivotal in a lot of their governance proposals within DeFi Summer as well. But this was kind of the timeline that I expanded on, starting off with open community, moving to then organized voting, where we started to see these proposals, their passing of them being executed, then these formal proposal systems where you start to see voter profiles, more in-depth statistics about the voting so that voters are more educated, and then liquidity mining, where these governance incentives start to explode. So now I'm going to go into Element's voting system. So why I think Element's voting system was really unique is because we made a lot of intentional decisions to remove information that is traditionally displayed on governance UIs. And one example of that was we specifically made our delegates not featured by voting power and randomized them. Because I think we did a psychological study based on the past governance launches that we saw, that a lot of people end up voting or delegating their voting power to the first person that they see within the organized UI. So without inherently noting that's a bias action that they're creating, you're incentivizing like hundreds of your users that may be claiming tokens or being interested in your governance launch to be delegating power to this one person that may be placed within the first spot of your UI. So that was a really intentional decision we made because voting systems, you're giving a lot of power to people within a huge governance DAO structure, and it could be a large protocol or a small protocol. A lot of these protocols oversee large treasuries. So we wanted to be more responsible in how we are architecting our UI and how that reflects a responsible governance system. The second decision was having more contextual information on an overview page and dividing that from the actual act of voting. So when you go to vote for traditional federal and regional governance systems, like your hometown or your local state representative, you don't see any bias or contextual information in the act of voting. So we wanted to segment those two so that it simulates the governance and democracy systems that have been successful for years, and seeing that reflected in our own DeFi ecosystem in a sustainable way. So my favorite part, actually, who our front-end engineer actually architected the front end for, Cash, was our GSC UI. So traditionally, a lot of governance UI systems do not have UIs that showcase their main delegates or a lot of the delegates that hold the largest voting power, and they don't have ways to actionably incentivize their community members to both remove them from power and give someone new that may be contributing, posting new ideas in Discord or forums, and removing the power from the person that's been idle and giving them to someone new. So what we did was we kind of organized a system where you would see what the responsibilities of a GSC member. So if someone was interested, they can say like, oh, would I be qualified to overtake this role, to maybe make a post in the forum campaigning for people to delegate to me? Is it something that I can take on as a time commitment? And then they would also see, okay, who are the current members? If I know someone on the GSC, the Governance Steering Council, can I then message them for more contextual information if I do? And then also a rising delegates feature. So these are people that would be from the most closest to the threshold, which would be, in this case, the 100,000, 110,000 tokens, or the people that are lowest in the threshold. And people would have the ability to search through possible delegates that they could delegate to based on the people that are closest to the threshold. So if you see a GSC member and you could click on their profile and see like, oh, I've been traditionally delegating to them for 3 months, but they haven't been voting for me like how I originally thought when I delegated to them. I no longer want them to represent me as a community member. You can go in, remove your voting power, and delegate it to someone new, or campaign to be a delegate yourself. So I think why this is important is because we're removing these traditional structures that we saw in governance voting systems, where we have politicians in power for 2 to 3 year terms, and we can actually remove people that have been idle in these positions. And I think even in Web3 and DeFi, we're starting to see a lot of delegates that are accumulating multiple governance DAO delegations. And that's something that we need to solve through more consistent delegate UIs, because we need more fresh faces in the DAO system that aren't the same VCs that are posting the same opinions. So I encourage everyone here to become more active in DAOs or implement systems like this. And then also experiments. So I think governance is really cool because with governance incentives, there's really cool things that we could do to move that initial number of engagement up and incentivize users in new ways. So one thing we did at Element was conduct an NFT experiment internally, and we launched an NFT project or protocol. And this was a gift to the DAO, but we issued 10,000 spots to community members, and the first 6,000 were for community members that claimed and delegated within the first 24 hours. And what we saw as a result of this is 6,000 people delegating and claiming in 72 hours. And if you look historically at a lot of the governance launches for Optimism, ENS, and a lot of the other protocols, having numbers like this so fast and within such a small time frame is a really good example of how you can incentivize people to become active in your governance system early on and claim without letting it sit idle and them forgetting that they have token issuance. So that was a cool experiment, and I encourage a lot of people here that are within DAOs to kind of think about how they can utilize governance incentives and the existing products that we have in the space to make governance more fun. So yeah, contributing. So my last point is our Element DAO is slowly transitioning fully to a DAO, but one thing we're looking for is more contributors for our NFT project. That was my timer. For our NFT project, for the governance protocol itself, and also contributors for ideas for our main core product. So if you're interested in governance systems, shaping the future of governance systems, or how NFTs could affect that, I'd love for you to contribute to Element, or you can come up to talk to me in Cash. But yeah, that is designing governance systems for Element.
Okay, very nice. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the audience? There should be a microphone roaming around. Okay, we've got a question here in the middle. Sorry, maybe. Sorry, if you're there, we'll come to you.
Hi, hello? Yeah, what's your experience with or opinion of votes versus governance, and basically, implicitly or explicitly delegating your votes to a vote, try to prevent it, try to endorse it, how to deal with it?
Yeah, I think the act of staking creates too much of a deterrence to a lot of governance. And I think that smart contract development in the space is innovating, like our voting vaults are innovating. Compound also has a lot of innovative work that has been done with their voting vaults. And we need to find a medium between people staking their voting power completely and their tokens and being able to you have them as liquid as well and be active members of governance systems. So I think it will be a while till we see like a hybrid structure that benefits community members.
Okay, and I think there were a couple more questions maybe in the middle.
At what point in the maturity of the project did you start building these, thinking seriously about the UI and building the infrastructure? Were you hacking tools together before you got to that stage?
Yeah, so it was really interesting. We probably had a 2-month full research period on how voting systems traditionally have been executed in the Web 2 and traditional governance world, and what they've done poorly and what they've done well. And actually, an interesting fact for this audience is there's not a single country in the world right now that has a formal, fully online voting process. And I think what's cool about the work that we're doing in the space all collectively and this room is a lot of the federal and government systems that take so long to innovate, they're going to be learning from the governance voting systems that we're crafting and how they're effectively executed and how they could be effectively executed for federal and regional voting systems. So it's really cool, and it was definitely a lot of research. Like, we had our CEO, our COO, was meeting with incredible researchers within the space, and we had research sessions with our front-end and smart contracts lead weekly before we even started touching high-fidelity mock-ups. So it's definitely very research-based.
Okay. Do we have any more questions from the room? Then I guess all it leaves is for me to say thank you very much, Tina Haibodi.
Thank you.